All right, let's get the party started. We have Tom Kaczynski back as a co-host, and we've added Peter Fallon from up in Maine and Christian from here in Newport and Dave Peros from the Cape. They're the host. Tom, as I said, Christian Awestruck Guide Service out of Newport. Dave Peros still running the KDG, I think. And Peter Fallon, Maine Stripers. So there's a good example of a bar-built estuary. Really dark, muddy water in the back, and then clean sand because of the tidal exchange. And there's a network of other ones along the way, but this would be an example of a bar-built estuary. Coastal plain estuaries are formed at the last ice age. As these glaciers receded and melted, sea levels rose and they inundated the lower lying river valley. Man-made estuaries, the exchange you get through the breachway, create an estuarian environment in the inside. Many of the same baits, and therefore their sort of spot in the food chain is very similar to the estuaries we already discussed. The most basic features of a estuary is the instability due to the ebb and flow of the tide. Plant and animal waste are washed away, sediments are shifted, and fresh and salt water are mixed. Estuaries provide a calm refuge from the open sea for millions of plants and animals. And the diversity of a habitat supports enormous abundance and diversity of species: fish, shellfish, lobsters, worms, grasses, algae, tons of plankton. Visiting animals from land, sea, and freshwater use the estuary for feeding, breeding, spawning, and as nurseries for their young. So they're super fertile, super productive environments. The most productive times in the early season are usually late afternoon through evening, as the water temps are the warmest they're going to be all day and the winds have died down. As water temps warm, the action can then be throughout the day. Another caution, though, would be don't overstay your welcome. Spin tackle might be a 7 or 8 foot rod with approximately 3/8 to 1.5 ounce, 3,000 or 4,000 size reel, 15 or 20 pound braid, generally a fluorocarbon leader to maybe 15 or 20 pounds. A 9 foot 8 weight, a large arbor reel. Fly line choice is the intermediate, certainly the most universal. For drop offs or deeper water, you probably don't need much more than a 250 grain to fish those channels that might be 6 to 10 feet deep at the most. So the first bait is Atlantic Menhaden. They're a great and oily food source for bass, for osprey, for whales, really a linchpin bait fish in the whole ecosystem of the North Atlantic. So you generally travel by size, and that holds true all season. So tactics, work around the edge of the school. Throwing your lure or fly into the middle of the school doesn't make much sense unless you're snagging. But for the most part, avoid the middle, work the edges. Don't forget to get underneath as well. Flies wise, big 7 or 8 inch bucktail deceivers, razzle dazzles. Big poppers are fun when menhaden around. The adult sand eels come into the estuaries in November. When we notice sand eels, it's generally in the May, June timeframe. They travel in large schools, generally slow moving. They're plankton feeders, which keeps them high in the water column. But as the evening approaches, they bury themselves in the sand. So they're often in shallow water and they'll emerge again just before daybreak. A good way to notice this is you'll see terns diving at dawn and dusk right along the shore. Or you might rake the sand yourself with your fingers. So a couple of lures would be the red gill teaser, a great way to imitate some of these small baits, particularly this young of the year sand eel. When people say slow and you want to fish slow, I always find it's even slower than slow.
Yeah, I find that with beginner anglers, they have a vision of what a saltwater fly fisherman looks like in their head, and it's big, giant double haul casts and tucking the rod under their arm and stripping with both hands. It's not always the technique that's going to get you the bite. A lot of it is, gentle finesse.
Add to the fly portion of this, the soft tackle flatwing's just been a great sand eel fly. And if I was going to use a second fly on a rig, I would use another soft tackle flatwing. But other people might have other thoughts.
Yeah. So a lot of times a spook does pretty well. You may not be sure what they're eating, and then you discover that they're small sand eels, something that stands out from the group. A lot of times in shallow water, mud flats, sand flats, the spook is a go-to. That or something like an albie snack.
The presence of mature silversides sort of overlaps the striper time in the estuary. 3 to 5 inch adults make them for prime forage. They tend to be in deeper water, in bays and salt ponds. But when they spawn, they come into the shallows. During the day, a lot of times they might be in the deeper water. They eat algae, copepods, worms, insects, shrimp. Fish deeper around drop-offs and channels, as we said. Blind casting will pay off. Be on the lookout for concentrations around points and tides. Moderate retrieve, most folks, we talked about this, most folks seem to retrieve too fast. And also you might find it effective to cast past the tightly packed bait that might be closer to shore to something that's deeper. Any thoughts on fishing over Silversides, you guys?
There's a couple of places on the south side of the Cape that I know, Peter, that at low tide, you'll have tidal pools.
Mhm.
And you'll find schools of Silversides actually trapped inside of a tidal pool. And as the tide comes up, those fish will flush out, and you can actually have some pretty good fishing. And
Cinder worm swarms. There are many different species of worms. Even in one location, there's many different species of worms. They're generally over soft bottoms, mud and sand. They burrow into the mud and hide during the daylight, but then when the temperature's right, water temperature might reach 58 degrees or so, the adult basically releases a segment of its body, an inch or an inch and a half long portion, and that's which then becomes the swarm. But if you locate a swarm, it's likely to repeat on successive moons. There's a population there. It'll could repeat itself in upcoming moons.
They're all swimming different speeds. They're all different sizes. It can be overwhelming.
Christian's exactly right. You'll see any number of activities, whether it's moving a lot or dead drifting or the colors. There's other predators that feed in this environment. Squid is a great example of something that's likely there. They seem to be everywhere. They're there a lot, and they'll feed on these worms. Again, great time for a dropper rig, and again, look for that concentrated flow. Any other thoughts on how to solve this riddle?
I know that Hoagie makes a very small little
right.
worm, soft plastic. You can rig that, with like a small swim bait hook, right? So a little weedless rig that works pretty nicely.
Squid spawn in estuaries in the spring. They reveal themselves by splashing on the surface. You see them white, but that's generally lifeless. But remarkable how they can change color. That's part of why they're hard to see. A couple tactics. A jerky retrieve. It imitates the movement. The soft plastics, the sluggo, or the hoagie, or the albi snack. Any thoughts on fishing?
For the surf guy, Super Strike Darter is a great.
Yeah, good point. What I like about those, it digs you down a little bit, but when you stop it, it starts to rise. It gives you a nice little way to stall the bait and keep it somewhere and maybe even dead drifted.
Peter, unless you're in really ripping current, which you can find in estuaries, squid are fast.
Yeah.
And if you're purposefully trying to imitate a squid, move that fly.
yeah, I think that typically, I don't know if a lot of times you associate squid with colder water. If you go up on the flats and you're throwing a fly, you'll oftentimes have a good sized squid chasing your fly.
So additional saltwater edge resources. We have the blog with surf casting, saltwater fly, light tackle stuff, vertical jigging, podcasts with surf, fly, and inshore topics. Striped bass fishing has declined over the last decade or so. If we don't participate in this process with comments, they're going to take a look at all aspects of the striper fishery. It could be that they, in fact, move the goalposts. The goals they're shooting for aren't as high. They come up with some goals they can make, and that becomes our new normal. Also would compliment and thank every one of the guys here tonight for their participation, but also for their efforts as it relates to speaking up for striped bass and trying to get this thing turned around. If you do send comments, I'll put this in the note too, but if you do send comments, a couple of companies, Costa, Sims, Orvis, Van Staal, and a few others have supported a raffle that's basically a participation prize. Send in comments, you copy an email address I'll include when I connect with you guys, and you're entered in this raffle. I want to thank the co-host tonight, Peter Fallon from Maine Stripers, Christian All from Awestruck Charters. I just think of you as I don't know, you don't have a business name, do you?
No, I do have one now, but it's just called Cap Dave Perros Guide Services, LLC. Bring your flat wings.
And Tom, as always, thanks for your help. All right, guys. Thank you very much.